Well, a few months ago, Myanmar had a democratic election, and uh, the prevailing Democratic Party over there uh, succeeded with a great majority. However, the armed forces of the country, with whom they had a tentative agreement and with whom they were sharing power, did not exactly like this development, and so on claims of election fraud and numerous other things, took control of the country, dissolved the parliament, and arrested the cabinet and the prime minister or the state councillor.
Now, I wanted to interject here because, from what I recall, there was this really surreal video of a fitness instructor doing an outdoor session, and right behind her there were like,
Yes, the coup was taking place. Yeah,
yes,
it was awfully surreal, and the
yes,
thing that one must understand about the country is that this is not a full democracy. This country had been in a under a military dictatorship for many years.
hmm
The recent sort of semi-democratic period only sort of began in like 2008 when they came to sort of a compromise agreement, and in this, the military, whom still maintains a great deal of economic power over the country because they've got their hands in quite a few things across the nation, has almost like an independence, a nominal independence from the civilian government. The ministries that pertain to the army and navy and all the other branches are run by the military. Those members of the cabinet are appointed by the military. The parliament, which is nominally elected, actually has a significant portion. I believe it's about a quarter, which is appointed by the military. So no matter what the democratic result is, you can't change the constitution because there's going to always be a quarter of the parliament permanently in the hands of the military. But this was thought to not necessarily be enough, because when Aung San
right,
Suu Kyi's party was successful in gaining this landslide victory, it really set the tone that, well, now we have a mandate. Now we can maybe revise the Constitution, though we can't really meet that limit. We have the legitimacy to pursue those sorts of aims, and this they could not allow to go along, so they clamped down on it really hard. There was a lot of thought that something like this would happen
something
shortly after the election, and here it was.
something occurs to me. So I I don't know if you can answer this, but is that what is that what makes this a coup and not? Because one kind of, I could say, hot take was what happened in DC on January 6th. I didn't want to call it a coup because if it was a coup, there would be an organized force storming the halls of Congress, armed and taking hostages. That it was more of a riot or an insurrection, basically. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts, though, on? Oh,
As to whether or not, strictly speaking, this is a coup,
well, what makes this a coup compared to what happened in DC back January 6th, basically?
well, this isn't a bunch of disaffected citizens marching on the Capitol. This is the armed forces as a political force
hmm
seizing control of the government. Now, there are provisions in the Constitution where a state of emergency and where martial law can be enacted, but they acted independently in this endeavor. They went ahead, they arrested the people with whom they're supposed to be, taking orders from, namely the president and the state councilor, and whether or not those resignations were forced or what so have you, those people were no longer in those positions. A new president was appointed by the military, and a new state councilor was appointed to fill in their place, and martial law was declared. It is using the term coup is not, well, I mean, like the term regime. It's like, oh, it's a government I don't like, I call it a regime instead of, the government of this country. No, it's an out and out coup. The military has acted cohesively to overthrow the sitting government of the country.
So I have a
Okay.
question.
And I think
Yes.
I have a question. Was the new prime minister slash president slash leader suspected of terrorism?
No, voting fraud.
Oh, okay.
I'm being entirely serious.
that works.
Voting fraud and corruption.
I'm just saying because in America, like terrorism trumps everything. So
Well, yeah, no.
Cool.
Here's the thing: if it was terrorism or possibly the possession of a dangerous substance like oil, I think that we would have been the first one in there. But as for this, there is no oil in Myanmar that I'm aware of that would set us off. So I'm afraid to say that this was done even under murky conditions or pretexts, even for us. Jesus Christ! But it does, I think, remind us that fascism is only so far away in many parts of the world. We have it really easy here in the West when we're so apart. I mean, from Europe, you can see the far right, marching, goose stepping across all of Europe. But I mean, there are some countries in which it is still the old breed that still lingers out in the hills or in the boardrooms or in the barracks, just waiting for the moment to come out. And there you are, and now hundreds of people are dying over there in that country because the people have had their taste of democracy, and they're not going to let it go.
Ruben, you're muted, I think.
Yeah, I noticed. Quick question to you, Isaac. Is there any CIA fuckery going on?
Here's the problem from a geopolitical point of view. We didn't sponsor this.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's one would think, oh, a coup. Well, I guess that was no, and there's a great deal of debate over who might have given them the okay, because the military couldn't have gone ahead without at least having an assurance that somebody was going to have their corner. And I mean, the Russian government tends to act in sort of a global opposition to whomever we support or something along those lines. They've had a rather nuanced sort of position on the coup, but I it's unclear whether or not they might have been the ones who gave the military the sort of the go ahead. A lot of people, and this is, well, it's vogue to say China is behind everything. China, has a working relationship with the military and has been covering their backs more or less as one could in the UN, but it's really unclear as to whom sort of gave them the assurances they need to sort of undertake this move, because it was awfully dramatic, and we had actually been sanctioning the military in Myanmar for quite a while because they were essentially running the country. They would not give way to a civilian government.
Well, thanks for the international report, Isaac.
Fight fascism, boys! Come on.
Heck yes. So that remains to be seen. I certainly hope that the good people of Myanmar are able to see this through. But I would like to reiterate that the reason why I brought up CIA fuckery is that CIA has been involved. They have their hands involved everywhere. So should we come out of this and it turned out, yeah, CIA did have some kind of involvement, I'm like, but I just want to state this, that there is some sort of what you could call narcissism being in Americans, that we feel that we're involved. If something happens, we're involved some way.
It must be us. It must be us.
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge that, but at the same time, it's like when we fuck up globally. So
Do you guys think, like, in an ideal world, right, the international community would be able to respond to a coup by coming in and pushing that government back, or are you more isolationist in that we should let countries deal with their own stuff?
I want to point out that I learned about this, or at the very least I brushed up about this recently. What happened in Rwanda and the ethnic genocide that happened there. The Blue Helmets, the UN peacekeepers, did. They either had their hands tied or they otherwise did fuck all to try to intervene and do something and to intervene in the conflict, basically. So first
And
off,
this is the problem: is that the reality is that our military is so problematic.
Yeah.
So in reality, we know we can't depend on this. But in an ideal world, like if we could have our ideal, situation, would that be the goal? Would be to be able to interfere here and be like, stop cooing, like,
I,
you
I,
know,
I think a situation that and
or is
and
that always going to be a colonialist mindset of like, let me go fix it over there, as
I
opposed to they can.
I don't want to Godwin here. I don't want to Godwin, but we didn't involve ourselves in World War II until the Japanese struck at us, and Germany and the two of them said, "Yeah, we're together in on this," and decided to tee off. And they're like, "Well, now we're dragged in, basically." Now, the goings on in Myanmar, I don't think whatever goes on there, I know that I'm ignorant in saying this, but I would imagine that it's isolated to that part of the world. Basically, us interfering would turn out to be another Vietnam or an Afghanistan, to where we're just going to we're just going to pour gasoline on this fire, basically. So
Yeah,
I am
yeah.
isolationist only in the sense that I don't trust us for a goddamn second to resolve anything.
And that's a real big issue, is that where exactly is the place of the international community, at what point? And when people say to push that government out, I mean, what do we mean? Do we mean sanctions, a battery of sanctions on that country? Because right now the international community is hammering Myanmar's military and the country. Even the U.S. I mean, give it to Joe Biden. He actually, the moment this happened, he threatened sanctions, and then
So
several
we all
days.
agree sanctions are good then?
Well, I mean,
in this
look at
world, or
Cuba.
no?
Cuba, Iran, Venezuela. I mean, the sanctions are more often than not starving
Yeah.
the poor and the destitute, basically.
Okay, yeah.
So I would be, my default is, hey, don't get involved. Let them sort it out, because the moments that we have gotten involved, I mean, for fuck's sake, we're still in Afghanistan, and it was only recently that we got out of Iraq, basically. So
I mean, like, my stance is the last war that we entered that was at all justifiable was World War II.
Mhm.
And I was recently reading about a socialist activist whose name I don't remember, who was protesting against our involvement in World War II. And I just thought that was weird. Like, is it still something we feel like maybe we shouldn't have gotten involved in World War II?
It had been the socialist position for a while to be strictly against war. They had a real strong pacifist streak for the longest time. They opposed World War One. They opposed World War Two on the similar grounds. Now the thing with hindsight, we can look back and say, "Oh my God, the Holocaust! Oh my God,
Right.
this." But I mean, Nazi Germany was not the world's first anti-Semitic government. I mean,
Mhm.
we fought on the side of an anti-Semitic government during World War One. Which one?
Yep.
The Russian government, which was prior to Nazi Germany, the world's most anti-Semitic country that had ever existed. I mean, please, the pogroms of what is it called? It's of the Pale of Settlement, I must admit, could be regarded as almost, what is it called? It's a first step towards what eventually would become the Holocaust.
Mhm. And there and
Where do you
during
draw the line?
and the First
as a
World
socialist?
War, and during the First World War, there was the massacre and the genocide of the Armenians too, on done
Most
by
certainly.
the Ottoman Empire. I think where we're, and I wanted to ask Isaac. I just wanted to bring up a take. What was stopping those same, well, to the group? What was stopping those same socialists who were opposing intervention in the Second World War from joining the Russian side, basically?
Well, I will say one thing. I mean, that regardless of one's political opinion, to take it to the farthest logical extreme, it's like, yeah, well, I think America should intervene in this conflict. Then does that then mean, well, stick to your principles, pick up a rifle and go fight in Spain like Ernst Hemingway? And I'm like, oh God, I think that's a little much for any one person.
Wasn't
But what?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think it fair enough. I mean, you know, I think that you can have a political opinion whilst not sort of be obligated to take it to the farthest extreme. Like, yeah, I think that you should be able to say that you're in favor of intervention in Europe if you're in like during the World War II period, and then sort of, you know, not say, well, stick to your principles, go and enlist. Like, well,
I don't know about that, to be honest. Like, I'm probably biased because I'm a veteran, but I'm like, you know what? If you want to start a war, then you should be in it.
Wait, Steve, you're a veteran?
fair enough.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Air Force, 3 years. It didn't really work out. I don't recommend the military to anybody as a result.
Mhm.
But if you join, I know you join for the right reasons. Like, it just goes in hand with, if you're going to be willing to put your life out there to the extent that the military requires, you've got all of the integrity that you need to at least start with. They might still wear you down, but that's you join for the right reasons.
My attitude has always been, I'm not afraid to fight in a war that I believe in. I don't think I'd be very helpful. I'm not really built for it, but I'm not afraid of that. I would never join the U.S. military because I feel like it is just fundamentally, again, like I support and I thank you, Steve, for your service, but I don't believe.
My God.
Don't mention it.
I don't believe that our military is being directed in good faith at all. I don't believe in any of the overall fundamental initiatives of what we're doing.
No, it's a blood money racket. That's what the U.S. military is, and it's been going on since Vietnam, if not earlier. So I'm right there with you in that. Like, I think people, when they join for the right reasons, but that doesn't make those reasons smart.
Right. But it just creates this dynamic where, with what's going on in Myanmar, it's like you sort of are between a rock and a hard place in terms of, do you believe we should be doing anything, but at the same time, like our military is so co-opted by profiteering that we could never trust our military, or and I guess obviously the in between is diplomacy, which is I guess what we're doing. But then like we mentioned, that's got unintended consequences because it affects the people who are not.
I've been waiting to get in this point. Basically, where I'm coming from on that whole thing, as far as like international policy or when to get involved in other people's wars. I think there's plenty of room to be said that one country has all the reasons to want to be involved in some way or another of another country's war, especially we're sharing the same big blue rock that we're on here, right? So I think the trouble is that you have to first set a foundation of integrity and humanism as the justifying reasons for getting involved. So there's probably no line in the sand that I would say, like, over such and such issues we can't get involved, but I would say you need to justify that there is a inhumane, there's inhumanity, there's human rights being refused or denied, and those human rights could even be agreed to as a right to a fair and honest vote within your country if we get to that point as a world, right, as a planet and a species, to say a right to a fair vote is a human right. I would love to see that day come. That day has not even come for Americans, as it is, because our ballots are fucking rigged and you don't have good voting systems. You have first past the post, which is fucking it all up and not really getting what the people want representing them. So yeah, there's lots of steps that the US needs to take and to look in a fucking mirror before it goes and gets involved in other people's wars today. Yep. But in the ideal future that we should be moving towards, I think it's perfectly reasonable to think, as an international law, international community among many nation states, what we should establish as human rights that should always be respected no matter what country you're in, like the right to believe what you fucking want to believe, sorry, Saudi Arabia, you're not doing that one very well. Then we can, like, once we've established those human rights and agreed to them, continue further with diplomacy and doing something a hell of a lot better than sanctions, although just with just as little blood spilled, hopefully,
Right.
in terms of being able to make that work.
One
Well,
thing
then
that
I'm so sorry.
no, go ahead, Isaac. I wanted to ask one dumb question, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, I certainly appreciate the point you brought up there, Steve. But then that sort of leaves the question: then until we sort of create that more perfect union here, does that then mean that we must turn a blind eye to the affairs of the world? I mean, is it not equally immoral then that when we have this power at our disposal to actually change the world, that we sit on it until we are sort of ready, at least, like we are sort of philosophically ready, like once we've perfected our democracy and worked out the kinks, then now we can sit here and sort of go to the world and say, this is how you must do it.
So I wouldn't say we should be turning a blind eye. Obviously, always expose the truth for what it is. Report, do spy work, whatever is necessary to be able to let the whole world know what's happening. That's first and foremost. But from there, it might not even take all that much for us to get at least some baseline of integrity out of ourselves so that we can go do something to help. It's kind of like if we still had slavery in place, right? And the option was, well, we've got a slave army we could send over there and they'll probably get killed, but it'll do some greater good for the world, right? So there's our moral question being asked: is it okay that we don't first like end slavery and then find a volunteer force to go do the work? Or should we just send the slave army to go die for shit that they had nothing to do with?
One question that I wanted to ask to Isaac. You talked about the Spanish Civil War. I know that Ernest Hemingway wrote about the Spanish Civil War. Was he involved though? Was he on the ground?
I think he actually did go to Spain, and I think a lot of other writers went there. I think Blair went there as well. I don't. A lot of folks actually volunteered. A lot of politically active fellas volunteered and went over there to fight against fascism. You give them their credit; they put their money where their mouth is. I mean, it's like, you don't like fascism across the planet. All right, pick up a rifle and go to Spain. I just fear for the day that I could sit here and say, well, I mean, I personally don't like the military dictatorship of this country, and it's like, okay, well, pick up a rifle and go to Syria. Put your money where your mouth is. Like, God dang it! I mean, I feel that whilst it is a little hollow that one who's not willing to fight should sort of call for others to shed blood for what one perceives as a greater good. I mean, that's sort of hypocritical when you think about it. But I would like to think that as long as everybody gets the same destination, that we all agree this is an evil and it must be like purged from the world, then I mean, those little inconsistencies don't necessarily matter as much. But I mean, that's just me.
Well,
Okay.
I guess to your point, just to give you some credit in there, Isaac, it's definitely not like my belief that a person should not have any opinion whatsoever about, like, man, it would really be great if somebody would do something about this, like this military coup taking place here, just to want something like that, to have an opinion of like, better to not have that military coup, might be worth taking some risks. That's not exactly like what I would mean when I'm like, if you're willing to go, or if you want a war. It's more like if you're really strictly stating like, we need to go to war now, right? If you're the one making the vote and saying, yeah, we got to do it now, making that decision, then you're the one that should be willing to risk just as much sacrifice as anybody else who's going to be a part of it, if that makes sense.
Hashtag draft Congress.
Yes.
Yes.
Draft Congress and their kids. Now, we have gone a little long, but that's okay. I want to thank everybody here. A lot of good topics, a lot of good opinions here, a lot of good discussion. I think now is a good time as any time to end. Does anybody have any final thoughts? David, you have any final thoughts on all this?
I don't think I have any final thoughts. But I did think that was a really interesting conversation, especially at the end. I really look forward to talking more about international issues. And thank you to Isaac for bringing knowledge around that.
Thank you, Isaac, for being our unofficial international correspondent.
I'll pass that on.
And one more thing before we leave. I just want to point out that the last time we had this discussion, we did bring up Ireland, and I know things are escalating as we speak. So
yeah,
solidarity, and I sincerely hope that the good people of Ireland are able to properly become independent of England, and the empire. The empire needs to go.
Lord have mercy, please. No, let's not get into this again. But please,
okay.
People of Northern Ireland, throw your guns into the sea. Come on.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we should end that and that here. Thanks everybody, and we hope to hear everybody tune in for our next episode.
Yay.
Late.